It is college fantasy tonight. My hands are still shaking from all of the action around the country today in college football. I mean, you had Notre Dame go down. You had Texas A&M go down. Anthony Richardson stymied by Kentucky. We're going to get to all of that. But before we do, let's drop this video a like, subscribe, like the video, subscribe, like the video, help us grow this channel, this format. This fantasy format, Campus to Canton Leagues, we want to see it grow. But we start every college tonight presented by Canton.com with the rundown, and that is where we're going to start tonight. Of course, with the 12 o'clock game, Alabama survives Texas 20-19. Alabama was a 20-point favorite in this one. They only win by one, Matthew. Quinn Ewers looked really good early on. I think that this game could have played out a little bit differently had he been healthy throughout.
100%. I posted on Twitter, and I truly mean this. If Ewers plays that entire game, I think they win, and I honestly think they win by at least a touchdown, if not more. Started out the game looking good. 9 of 12, 134 yards, ends up not with any touchdowns or interceptions. But if you were watching that game, you saw that unfortunately Xavier Worthy dropped a couple balls, including a deep pass that he lost probably in the sun. And then he did drop a touchdown pass that, in my opinion, he should have caught. With him going out, he got drove into the ground, unfortunately. I believe it was by Will Anderson. It may have been by Dallas Turner. I can't remember which one it was exactly.
It was Dallas Turner.
Dallas Turner gets driven into the ground. We don't know the extent of the injury yet. There's hopefulness that it's only a sprained AC joint. Rumor was he was able to actually rotate his arm after the game, but we don't know for sure. Hudson Card does come in. Doesn't look horrible, right? He actually looked, I felt, fairly good as the game went on. Ends up 14-22 for 158 yards. No touchdowns, no interceptions, but he also gets banged up in this one. Gets pulled down. It looks like he has some kind of ankle injury. Still guts it out. Had a couple big runs to keep Texas in that game. Xavier Worthy, just 97 yards again, should have had a touchdown, ends up dropping one. And, I mean, Bijan, what else can we say about this guy? 57 yards on the ground and one touchdown. Doesn't sound like a lot, but 73 yards receiving yards. Every time this guy got the ball, it felt like Alabama was meeting him in the backfield. He was making defenders miss, going through defenders. He had, in my opinion, an incredible game. I think he solidified himself. If anybody had any question about how good he was, he solidified it today against one of the best defenses in the game. But we have to talk about
He had a nice
Alabama,
catch down the field where he had to contort his body and reach back for the ball. The type of stuff you want to see from a potential Dynasty 101 pick next year.
Yeah, he looked amazing. But let's talk about Alabama. They were the team that won. I'm going to save Bryce Young for last. Jace McClellan, surprising game here. 97 yards, broke a big touchdown run that put Alabama up. It looked like all of a sudden, you're sitting there and you're like, oh, here comes Alabama. They're finally gotten into the game. Texas scared them a little bit, but no. Texas ends up hanging in there. Jahmyr Gibbs, though, has another good game, in my opinion. Only 22 yards rushing. They're not using him there, but 74 yards receiving, touchdown. Had a nice catch that ends up giving them the lead before Texas comes back in and takes the lead later in the game. The wide receivers here, Trayshawn Holden, Ja'Cory Brooks, Kobe Prentice, none of them do much of anything. This Texas defense that was horrible last year really seemed to bounce back and have a good game here. But Bryce Young, the stat line doesn't look sexy. Let's be honest. 27-39, 213 yards and one touchdown. It does not look sexy at all. But his run in the fourth quarter where they had a free blitzer on him, in my opinion, Texas wins that game if he makes that tackle. He misses. Bryce Young finds a way to duck under the tackle, runs for a first down, solidifies them into field goal range. They end on going on, kicking the field goal, winning the game. I know it's crazy to say, and it's not going to matter because we've got all season to go and it's week 2. That was a Heisman moment right there. I mean, this was a tough game. That Austin, I know we were talking about it in our midday chat, and he mentioned that's like the Auburn moment, and I 100% agree with him in that. Like, that was a massive moment for him, massive moment for Alabama. Congratulations.
Bryce Young has a free edge rusher coming at him.
No,
from
it was
his front
safety.
Side
it was a safety.
Safety.
They completely missed him, and he came right off the outside. Yeah.
From his front side, it looks like Bryce Young sees him late, ducks down like a cat. Safety goes right over the top of him. Matt, that fourth quarter was really pivotal for Alabama, of course, the game-winning drive. But it seemed like in the second half, they incorporated Ja'Cory Brooks a lot more. Now, 3 for 33 doesn't sound like a lot for him, but when you consider where he was on the depth chart to start the season and where they implemented him in this season because they had to get the offense going late in that game, I got to wonder if this is a similar transition or turn like it was against Auburn last year, where Ja'Cory Brooks played a huge role in that game.
It definitely could be, and I think a lot of that goes into the fact that Tyler Harrell has been out. Doesn't seem like he's coming back anytime soon, so Ja'Cory Brooks is likely going to continue getting snaps. We just need to see him continue to impress, because Nick Saban has been very vocal about the fact that he has not been impressed with a lot of these guys. But I do like that, the fact that he was a little bit more used in there. I actually thought he caught that touchdown that Jahmyr Gibbs caught at first as well. So used a lot more in the second half. Let's see if that continues over into next week. And I should point out, as the people are saying, Ohio State really cost Texas this win because the safety that missed a tackle on Bryce Young transferred from Ohio State. So we're sorry, Texas fans.
Well, we're going to be paying attention to who's backing up Hudson Card next week and possibly for the next couple of weeks if Quinn Ewers is going to be out for an extended period of time. Got to pick your candidates for that backup job are Charles Wright, the redshirt freshman, and then Malik Murphy, four-star quarterback freshman this year, went to the same high school in Gardena, California that Tom Brady went to. So it'll be Malik Murphy, toolsy, big arm quarterback. I would love to get to see him at some point if Texas finds themselves in a blowout and they need to take Hudson Card off of the field. Matt, of course, you also – go ahead.
I can tell you right now, we talked a little bit about this in our midday check-in. I'm down here with a lot of Texas people. That's who they wanted to come into the game at one point. They said, get Hudson Card out, put Malik Murphy, and I told them that is a bad decision, but we'll see if it happens.
Well, of course, you also covered Ohio State. Ohio State takes this one down 12-45, but Ohio State fails to cover. They're a 44-point favorite, fails to cover against Arkansas State, Matthew, but we saw C.J. Stroud, Marvin Harrison and company get on track in this one.
Yeah, and it took a while, too. It took about 4 minutes left in the second quarter before Ohio State really started rolling. I can't imagine this has that much to do with JSN, but we'll see if anything changes when they come back. I think there's a lot of people asking questions about this offense, and I think they're very fair. We talked a lot about it this morning on the Better Sports channel. Me and Moxley, I don't think they deserve to be put in the same tier as Alabama and Georgia right now. But CJ Stroud does put it together from the second quarter on. 16-24, 351 yards, 4 touchdowns, 3 of those going to Marvin Harrison Jr., who had himself a day. 7 receptions, 184 yards. Emeka Egbuka, not too shabby either. 4 receptions for 118 yards and 1 touchdown. You know, we wanted to see what this offense was going to look like in what we expected to be a shootout, and they did at least perform that in the third and fourth quarter. I believe most of them actually ended up sitting some in the fourth quarter as well. So.
Emeka Egbuka also adds a rush for 27 yards.
Yeah.
Productive in both phases of the game.
Yeah, he was used all over the place, which is always intriguing to see for him. TreVeyon Henderson as well had a pretty good day. 87 yards, 10 carries. No receptions, though, and I don't know if that's just because of how well Emeka and Marvin Harrison were doing, but does get to 2 touchdowns. Surprisingly, your boy Mayan Williams, just 48 yards. I don't know what was going on there. He's probably tired from carrying the team last week is probably what was going on there. So they gave him a rest against the lowly Arkansas State. But yeah, it was good to see that offense finally kind of click into gear here, but they have tough matchups coming down the road in Wisconsin and some other teams, so we'll see what this means for them.
For the purposes of CFF, I think we need to pay attention to Champ Fleming on Arkansas State. He had 10 catches, 105 yards, and he also had 2 rushes for 20 yards in this one. That's after having 122 yards and a touchdown last week. So Champ Fleming, maybe consider, if you're in a deeper league, maybe picking him up, at the very least putting him on a watch list. All right, thank you, Matthew. Brings us to Washington State, Wisconsin. This was one of my favorite games to watch today, quite frankly. You're talking about 2 teams with 2 totally, completely different styles. You got Washington State coming from the Pac-12 with the new offensive coordinator, with Cameron Ward. They were 17.5-point underdogs in this one, and they take it down 17-14. Barnabas, it wasn't pretty, but Washington State got it done in this one.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned how they have such differing styles, and the question of going into the game was, which one is it going to revert to? Because both teams can't play at totally different styles the entire game. And we found out it was going to be Wisconsin's style, where it's just slow, plodding, and that Wisconsin offense is built to be like that. Some interesting notes throughout the game. Each team had an interception that was fumbled back to the offense. So that just tells you how physical of a game this was. But it was just like back and forth. Washington State got on the board first, but the crucial fumble in the fourth quarter is what led to Washington State winning. With Wisconsin driving, they had 4 drives of over 5 minutes that just like didn't result in points. They just it was either a turnover and downs. It was just a mess. And both touchdowns that Wisconsin scored went to the tight end. But it was kind of a disappointing day for Braylon Allen for some people. He had 21 carries for 99 yards, as well as 2 catches for 12 yards. He just couldn't get it much going. Washington State was just selling out to stop that run. They showed they weren't really scared of Graham Mertz, so it was tough sledding for Braylon Allen. Graham Mertz, on the other hand, 18 for 31, 226 yards and 1 touchdown. Graham Mertz is not the best quarterback prospect that we have in college, right? So, this was honestly about as good as we could expect from him. But it is what it is, right? Going over to the other side, Washington State didn't really have it that much easier either because their style is, air it out and pass it all over the place. And
they had to be very patient today. Take what the defense was giving them. They had to do some long drives in a spread system that can be difficult to do because every pass has to be completed. But it seemed like they were able to get it going. So in the second half, they needed a few big plays to come to make it over the top in this one.
Absolutely. If you look at the time possession, Washington State only held the ball for a little over 20 minutes. It was not even close to. So in some sense that Washington State was able to play their style a little bit, but like had to tailor to the game script. Cam Ward had a decent stat line if you look at the numbers, but it wasn't really a passing day for him. He went 17 of 28 for 200, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. And he got a decent amount of rushing, but a lot of sacks as well. Physical game overall. Nakia Watson, the Wisconsin transfer, contributed most on the ground with 11 carries for 34 yards and 1 touchdown, as well as a catch for 31 yards. So, tough sledding for him as well. Not a lot of yardage available, and what little yardage he could get. We're adding Jalen Jenkins to our watch list, the true freshman, with a decent day as well.
Explosive, smaller player who the coaches seem to like there. Had a fumble last week. They still gave it to him, and they gave it to him in some critical situations in this one. After Nakia Watson has to be a senior. He's been in college forever. Jalen Jenkins is going to be someone that we want to pay attention to, especially in a spread system. We've seen, remember the name Boobie Gibson. Remember, I forgot the running back last year, the white guy. I forgot his name. But Boobie Williams. James Williams was the running back there under Mike Leach at Washington State. And I'm forgetting the guy that they compared to Christian McCaffrey. Anyway.
Max Borghi.
Max Borghi. Thank you, producer, saying it in my ear. Jalen Jenkins could be a productive player in this system. He's a little slight, but in a spread, that's probably not too bad. But go ahead. I'm sorry, Barnabas.
Yeah. He's a nice little jitterbug tool that they can use. And the receiving core, relatively quiet day for them. Dejon Stribling, Bernard Bell, Donovan Ollie, all fairly quiet days. Dejon Stribling, 3 catches, 16 yards. It was not a passing day for Cam Ward, even though he ended up with 200 yards. It was spread over many receivers, considering Stribling, Bell, and Ollie combined for 10 catches. So it was tough sledding, but they got it out.
Yeah, the important plays in this game weren't big plays. They were 3rd and 4s and getting a run for 6 yards, a quarterback sneak here. A big play was Nakia Watson's 31-yard reception. So Washington State, hats off to them. That's not easy going into Madison, getting a W with a totally different play style. Barnabas, you also covered Kent State at Oklahoma. A lot of upsets today. So, you had to be on upset alert. Kent State doesn't get the upset, but they were a 32.5-point underdog, 3-33. Oklahoma does not cover. But Dylan Gabriel and Bar Mim had a good day.
Yeah, absolutely. This score at halftime was 3-7, and that was after Oklahoma scored a 2-minute drill touchdown. And also after Kent State had missed a field goal. So this game could have been going into halftime 6-0 Kent State. So, this Kent State really hung in there for a good amount of time until Oklahoma finally decided that they were gonna pass the ball in the second half. The first half was really rough because they just couldn't get the running game going, and they just kept forcing it, no matter how few yards they got out of it. And I kept making the comparison. They finally stopped trying to make fetch happen in the second half, and they finally got that passing game going, and that's what opened up the running game. Dylan Gabriel had a pretty decent day at the end of the day, where he was 21 for 29, 296 yards and 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. Really good day. But the fact of the matter is, most of that production actually went to Marvin Mims, who had 7 of those catches for 163 yards and 2 touchdowns. Marvin Mims was practically uncoverable with that Kent State secondary. They just couldn't touch him. Anytime Dylan Gabriel looked off the safety, Marvin Mims was just wide open running downfield. So he was just running all over there. Oklahoma ended the game with 4 running backs with more than 5 carries, but the total rushing yardage was 134 yards. So they didn't see that much success on the ground. And it was tough sledding for them. On the other hand, in the first half, Colin Schlee for Kent State actually looked really good. He had some crucial runs, and he had this one play where he was rolling to his left and just darts that thing to a receiver on the sideline. He finishes the day 11 of 19, 131 yards. The stat line doesn't show it, but he looked confident, and this is the reason why Kent State schedules this murderer's row of early season schedule for them.
Tuck
he also had
Kent State players, tuck them away for right now. Maction is coming around, and we're going to be starting Colin Schlee, Marquez Cooper, Dante Cephas. That time is coming soon.
Absolutely. Marcus Cooper, this is how tough the day was. He had 22 carries for 55 yards. That's not efficiency, but it was just a physical up front. At one point, he ran straight into both of the Oklahoma defensive tackles unblocked, and the commentators were joking that it was 605 pounds worth of man just stopping him from running up the middle. So it was a rough day for him. But Dante Cephas also had 4 catches for 50 yards. Like you said, we're there. This is where they cut their teeth, and then it's going to be good times when Maction rolls around.
Absolutely. I got to point out, off the top of my head, I think that Marvin Mims, 7 for 163 and 2. I think that's the most productive game he's had in his career there at Oklahoma. He could have entered the transfer portal and potentially gone to USC. Sticks there at Oklahoma. He's obviously Dylan Gabriel's number 1 wide receiver. Got to consider him
Absolutely.
to be, day 2, day 3 draft capital in there. You got to like that if you've got him in campus.
At the very least. Yeah.
That brings us to a game that there are a lot of games on the slate today that I was looking forward to. Texas Tech, Houston at Texas Tech was one of them, because you got to figure these are 2 teams that run the spread. We thought that we would get a lot of points, but Vegas had the over-under at 65.5, and they nailed it. They nailed the number. This game was 33-30. It took overtime. It took overtime to get to the 30s. Austin, no Tyler Show. Donovan Smith takes the reins for him. Clayton Tune, Nathaniel Dell and company. How did they look today?
Yeah, you discovering the fringes of betting this season is the best development that's happened. Just completely. I just want to throw that out there first off. A lot of us picked Houston this morning. Pretty even matchup here. Texas Tech pulls this one out and looked pretty good doing it. This game was kind of like the equivalent of like when your parents said that you can't eat dessert for every meal. This game was like so fun that it ended up getting kind of rough at the end, quite frankly. Donovan Smith, dual threat guy, really not what we think of as a Zach Kittley type quarterback at all. We wondered how this marriage would look today. 36 for 57 for him, 351 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, and had 3 interceptions actually, and then 28 yards on the ground as well. Kind of all over the place at times, but locked in when it really mattered. He rushed for the game-winning touchdown in overtime, and like I said, was really, really good when it really, really mattered. We'll see if he keeps this job as the season goes on. They keep saying that Chuck is going to be back within the next 3 to 4 weeks. So that this is basically an audition for him. If he plays like he did today, turns down the bad plays 5, 10, 15%, I think they can live with the kind of upside that he gives him, where they drove the field at the very end of the game to tie this thing like quickly. Like he brings an element here that just no other guy can. So really, really interesting game from him. And we'll see what he does over the next couple of weeks. At running back there, Taj Brooks had himself a decent day for how this game kind of flowed. 18 carries, 80 yards, had a touchdown, a handful of catches, and 34 yards through the air. And was definitely dangerous. So we've talked about Taj Brooks a little bit over the past couple of years, a guy that's been there for a couple of years now. But I think he's an NFL back. I really, really do. And I think if this offense commits to the run, he is a really intriguing guy against some softer defenses that they might come up against in conference play. Receiving wise, Jaron Bradley was the big name last week. A lot of targets this week, but not a ton of catches. Six receptions, 50 yards for him.
And red zone targets. He's going to have better weeks. Jerron Bradley is that dude. He seems to be a guy that you have to consider starting, despite a not that great of a performance this week.
Yeah. I just think you might not be able to expect what he got for you last week, which was like 30-ish fantasy points. That those weeks may not be every week here. Miles Price, the guy that we thought would be the guy in this offense, 5 catches, 78 yards, and a touchdown today. And then Nehemiah Martinez. I flat out, if you gave me a list of names and you said which one of these guys is like not a college, like I never would have picked this guy out. I just flat out never heard of him. But Smith liked him. He threw him in crucial situations a couple of times. Had a really nice touchdown grab. Kind of a stockier, like slot kind of guy. I thought it was Taj Brooks when he made the first catch. Like he's kind of built like that. So really, really interesting name to watch. Don't go at him or anything unless it's a super deep league. But just make a mental note, Nehemiah Martinez, a guy to watch out for here. For Houston, Clayton Tune, not his best day. 20 for 39 passing, 268 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. And quite frankly, if he was a little bit better, Houston probably would have run away with this game. They just couldn't sustain drives consistently, and I think a lot of it was due to his inconsistency, and Texas Tech's pass rush definitely got to him at times there. All offseason, Alton McCaskill goes down with a knee injury. We say, who can be the next guy up there running back for Houston? We think we like the guy that's in that spot. Brandon Campbell, running back, transferred over from USC, kind of part of the shuffle, the movement there on their roster. 16 carries, 80 yards, a touchdown, had 4 receptions as well. Looked really, really good. I believe he left this game late. So it's going to be interesting to monitor injury-wise. What's he look like for the next couple of weeks here? But he looks sharp. I think he's definitely a guy that I would be looking into acquiring if I'm thin at running back as a cheap option. Nathaniel Dell, the guy we all expect to lead the charge there.
He did what he does.
Yes, exactly. 7 catches, 120 yards. Very successful kick punt return guy as well. Had a nice day there. So if your league does return yardage, you're probably pretty happy with how he did. And then Matthew Golden, quiet all game, 1 catch, 10 yards going into overtime. Caught what looked like it could end up being the game-winning touchdown in overtime. A little like bubble screen that he's reversed field, went the whole way back across the formation, 15-yard touchdown, and looked right at home doing it. So good signs there for him. Houston obviously probably going to drop out of the top 25 here. Any aspirations they had of big-time postseason play probably over, but we got a really good game out of it. So no complaints from me.
No complaints in that one. A lot of points scored in USC Stanford. We just went live following that game. Caleb Williams, Jordan Addison and company. I mean, they are firing on all cylinders. This was supposed to be a tough matchup. Didn't turn out to be that way.
No, Stanford, not much more than a speed bump here for USC's mighty offense early in the season. 41-28 the final. It was not that close. This was like 48-13, I believe, at one point in the second quarter, and USC just kind of coasted from there. Caleb Williams, the guy that we all, this offense goes as far as Caleb Williams can go. 20 for 27 on the day, or 18 for 28, sorry, 100, and that's not correct. 20 for 27, 341 yards, 4 touchdowns. Really, really nice day for him. He was efficient. We talked all last year about how Bryce Young was very zen as a passer. Like, he just looked way too comfortable, quite frankly, out there as the pass rush bears down on him. Caleb Williams has kind of developed a very similar feel to him as he's back there. A lot of times during this game where he was just in total control, and you can tell he's in total control. Very, very comfortable running this Lincoln Riley offense.
Future number 1 overall pick. I mean, if you had to take the odds on that, I would think that you could get some good odds on that. That's a bet that I would make.
I'm sure. I mean, Ewers looked good today too. What am I going to say? We'll see what he looks like from the shoulder. We need a bunch more games, but yeah, Williams. I mean, he's definitely looked the part here early in the season. Can't really say anything bad about him. His receivers, we've kind of talked a lot about Mario Williams, about Jordan Addison. Both of us kind of have personal stakes in both those guys. I think Addison ended up being the big guy today. 7 catches, 172 yards, 2 touchdowns. The first couple drives were basically just Addison and Caleb Williams playing catch. And when they want to do that, it's like impossible to stop it. Like he's open deep, short, intermediate. Like it just at his own will, just gets open. It honestly it's a lot of fun to watch. I miss him obviously leaving Pitt, but I think he made the right choice at this point. Mario Williams, your guy, 4 catches, 74 yards, really nice touchdown from him as well. Both guys dangerous, and I think both set for big seasons here. On the rushing side,
I think I still owe you from last year on a Mario Williams bet, so we got to figure that one out.
I don't even remember what we bet. Pride,
I don't even remember.
probably.
Yeah.
That's what I'd prefer to bet. We talked a little bit this offseason. Who's going to be the running back here for USC? And just to note, Travis Dye ended up being that guy here today. 14 carries, 105 yards, and a touchdown. And then Austin Jones, much more inauspicious kind of game here from him. 8 carries, 38 yards. I think Rayleigh Brown had like 5 for 22. But it was very obvious it was Travis Dye. He's the guy they wanted to get it to, and he looked the most dangerous out of their group. So I think if you're trying to add a USC running back, Dye is the direction that I am headed there. And quite frankly, I'm avoiding all the other receiving options. Just none of them are consistent enough, at least early here, beyond Addison and Williams for Stanford. I mean, Tanner McKee got a lot of hype this offseason, potential first-round guy here. 20 for 35 on the day, 220 yards, a touchdown, 2 interceptions, running for his life a lot of this game. Unspectacular. I don't see the day one hype for him. Quite frankly, I think day 2 would be a stretch based on how I've seen him play. He's an older prospect as well, as Barnabas was talking about before the show, at 23, 24 years old. So not a direction I'm really heading if I'm trying to make some quarterback moves here this year. His weapons, EJ Smith, Matt's guy. Matt said start EJ Smith today. Matt was right. 19 carries, 88 yards, a touchdown on the ground. Added a receiving touchdown, a couple of catches for 26 yards there. Injury. Couldn't tell if it was hand, if it was wrist, what it was. He fumbled on close to the goal line, lost the ball. They showed him doing some work on the sideline. They were testing to see if he could hold on to the ball. Came back out, got hit very similarly, fumbled again. They took him out for the rest of the game. So that's going to be something to monitor. I'm not sure exactly what their situation is going to look like behind him, if they're going to have a guy to lean on. But Smith kind of faltered down the stretch there. And then Ben Urasek, really their only receiving option of note, at least as of right now. Had a really nice rush in the first half, 50-yard rush, and then 5 catches, 45 yards. No touchdowns, but that's a pretty good day for a tight end. You're probably happy with that.
Austin, we gave you a couple of games where points were scored. We're giving you one more. Tennessee at Pittsburgh. Tennessee favored by 6, and they were able to cover in this one, 34-27. Hendon Hooker, Cedric Tillman looked good in this one.
Yeah, the announcers talked about it. It was totally true. These two teams played last year. The script was literally the exact opposite. Tennessee last year hopped out to a 10-0 lead. Pitt roared back, took the game over, and then kind of pulled it out at the end. This year, Pitt jumps out to a 10-point lead. Tennessee comes back and then kind of holds on at the end. Hooker going to get a lot of accolades for today, rightfully so. Didn't play that great in the second half, but when it mattered, he came up pretty clutch. 27 for 42 for him, 325 yards, a couple of touchdowns, about 30 yards on the ground as well. And really importantly,
someone
for him,
who John Lobb, friend of the show, Alfred Fernandez, friend of the show. Oh, well, Alfred Fernandez, a co-founder here at GameSkin.com. Very high on Hendon Hooker. I'm laughing because I don't even know if I can call Alfred a friend of the show because he'll never.
I was gonna say I would call him co-founder of Canton more than I would call him.
I don't know that he's a friend of the show. So anyway, they're those two very high on Hendon Hooker.
Yeah, 100%. You can see why. I mean, older guy, he's got his warts, but when he's in sync with some of these guys, he does look really, really good. And that Heupel offense, obviously, is pretty quarterback friendly, as we've seen over the years. Running back wise, Jabari Small, Jalen Wright split most of the groundwork that didn't go to Hooker on the day. Wright had 9 carries, 47 yards, no touchdowns to speak of. Small, really inefficient on the day, 10 carries, 17 yards. 2 touchdowns saves him though. So if you're, if you're a Hooker owner, probably not so happy because you were kind of hoping maybe Hooker would punch something in. Didn't happen. Small did that. maybe next week. Receiving wise, Cedric Tillman, like you mentioned earlier, is the guy here. It's like Nathaniel Dell, like we talked about earlier. It's like Addison at USC. These are the guys that drive these offenses. Cedric Tillman, 9 catches, 162 yards, a touchdown, and the touchdown was in overtime. Was a big one there for him. Ended up being the winner. Jalen Hyatt, pretty heavily targeted on the day, actually, but weirdly, like, we think of him as a deep guy. All short stuff. 11 catches, 73 yards, no touchdowns. Chris K, Bernie the Red Shirt, DFS contributor here with us, Camp Canton. Brew McCoy stan, world's biggest Brew McCoy fan. 4 catches, 58 yards. His first touchdown with the Tennessee Volunteers. So shout out to Brew McCoy. Shout out to Chris K, who I'm sure is very happy somewhere, possibly a few beverages deep. Just tears of joy streaming down his face. My Pitt Panthers, on the other hand, not only did they lose this game, they lost a lot of guys too. A ton of players went down with injury, both sides of the ball, offensive line, defensive line, linebackers, quarterbacks. Keaton Slovis harassed all through the first half, ended up leaving with an injury. 14 for 24, 195 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. I've given Keaton Slovis a lot of crap over the years. In fact, I've probably been one of the biggest Keaton Slovis haters. He hung in there today. He was getting the crap beat out of him. So actually, big shout out to him. Kept him in this game this first half. When he went down, Nick Patty came in, 9 for 20. Numbers aren't great. 79 yards, 1 touchdown, and obviously a couple of goofs in overtime there that may have cost them the game, but also drove them down the field for the game-winning or the game-tying touchdown. And quite frankly, basically was playing on one leg by the end of it, and was really, really good. It was a very gutsy performance from both of those guys. So shout out to Slovis and Patty. We said Israel Abanikanda is dead after last week. A very hyped running back there at Pitt. This is his 3rd year on campus. Out-touched last week, outgained last week, blah, 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 blah. Rodney Hammond down with injury, and he showed why we still think he can be a lead back. 25 carries, 154 yards, and a touchdown on the ground. A catch, 21 yards as well. He was very dynamic, and for large stretches of this game, he was the offense. So really good performance from him, and I think this is going to be hot hand for the rest of the season. If Hammond comes back and can be healthy, I think just whatever guy's looking good that day, it's going to be frustrating for us fantasy owners. Receiving wise, not a lot of great performances. Gavin Bartholomew had a really nice touchdown, though. A hurdle to defender, went about 60 yards to the house, ended up having 5 catches, 84 yards, and a touchdown there. And then Jared Wayne, 7 receptions, 82 yards, and a touchdown for him. Kanata Mumfield, we got to start showing a little bit of concern for Kanata Mumfield. He was not great last week. A couple of really big drops this week, including one in the end zone, I believe, early in the game. I'm just curious to see if he can, overcome some of these early season issues he's having there. Was the step up too much for him? I don't know.
Lots of fantasy relevant performances in this one. Gavin Bartholomew probably drafted to be a starter at tight end. Hendon Hooker, Cedric Tillman. Hopefully you have them stacked somewhere. There were not a lot of fantasy relevant performances in this next one. Iowa State at Iowa. The over-under on this game was 41.5. I guess when you got Iowa involved, you got to smash that under. 10-7. Iowa State takes this one. I think it was the first time in the last 8 matchups, something around there, where Iowa State takes it. Hunter Deckers, very frustrated in the first half, was throwing into coverage, threw 2 interceptions. He was 25 for 38, just 184 yards, 1 touchdown, those 2 interceptions. Was much better in the second half, taking what the defense was getting him, converting on third down. Xavier Hutchinson, you think of him being a big play guy, somebody who gets touchdowns. He did score a touchdown in this one, but 11 for 98. So doing some intermediate stuff. Jarrell Brock, 100 yards, but just on 27 carries. His averages less than 3 yards or less than 4 yards a carry, but was getting what you needed. Not a lot of offense in this one. Iowa's offense is historically terrible. They had less than 150 yards of total offense. They've scored 7 points in 2 consecutive games. Their biggest plays of the day were 11 yards and 15 yards, and I think that was on the last drive. Gavin Williams, a player that I was gravitating towards in the offseason, just 2 for 10 in this one. I don't know if he's totally healthy yet. Well, Sean Williams, who some were gravitating towards as being the starter and the guy who would carry here, 14 for 34. This offense is historically bad. I have no idea how that's going to change. I'm glad that Iowa State gets the W and get to remain undefeated. We're going to see them on the big stage later on, the Big 12 schedule. Hunter Dekkers, Xavier Hutchinson, they will have better days. Cartavius Norton pulled up with a hamstring injury in last week, in week 1. Jarrell Brock gets the majority of the carries here. Cartavius Norton's going to come back healthy at some point, and he's going to eat into Jarrell Brock's workload. No question. I mean, he was there getting the early touches in week 1. So I expect him to be back healthy and to have a role like we've thought all offseason. That brings us to Kentucky at Florida. Florida was favored by 4.5. Kentucky ends up taking it by 10, 26-16. Anthony Richardson, after the game he had last week, was wholly ineffective, seemed confused, was throwing into coverage in this one. 14 for 35, 143 yards, which, quite frankly, is Anthony Richardson has those types of games. But he only added 4 yards rushing in this one. They were dropping 8, keeping him in the pocket. 4 carries, 6 carries for 4 yards. Did not look good. The Florida offense didn't look good. He still got some development to do, especially when they're going to play drop 8 in him. He's got to learn that he can sit in the pocket, that he's going to have time when you only got 3 rushers. So we'll see what happens. His Heisman campaign takes a bit of a dip tonight on a game number 20 versus number 12. A lot of people were watching that game to see if Anthony Richardson could continue with his carrying of the Florida Gators. Couldn't do it tonight. That brings us to Will Levis. Now, of the two, Will Levis had the better day, but still just 13 for 24, 202 yards, 1 touchdown. Kavosiey Smoke adds 14 for 80. But Dane Key, true freshman wide receiver, may have had the play of the game in this one on a 55-yard touchdown on a post route, boxes out the corner, goes up and high points the ball, brings it in between his legs. Touchdown. They reviewed it. The play stood. Man, Kentucky has some freshman wide receivers that are not to be trifled with. I think people knew about Barian Brown, but Dane Key is playing very, very well. So that is the rundown. Make sure you tune in next week as we cover week 3's slate of games. That brings us to the G5 Minute. In every week with game creative lead Hannah Page on all the action. And there was some doozies today. There were some doozies, some upsets of G5 upsetting Power 5 teams. So let's take it to Hannah.
Hey everyone, this is Hannah Page with the G5 Minute. Each week, I'll bring you highlights specifically from the Group of 5, as well as major G5 producers for the day. Enough about Georgia and Bama. You want to hear about Marshall and App State. There were some early concerns about Marshall being without running back Rasheen Ali, but I think Kalen Laburn has definitely proven himself. He's had back-to-back 100-yard-plus games, and today he had 31 carries for 163 yards, 5.3 yards per carry, and 1 touchdown. And a highlight-worthy play with 7:19 left in the fourth quarter, Laburn hit a hole, ran for a big gain of 42 yards, and broke some ankles along the way. The next 3 to 4 games will be real favorable for Marshall and Laburn, so if you have him, you may want to consider starting him. Next up is Tulsa wide receiver Juan Carlos Santana. I'm not sure we are putting enough respect on his name. Last week, he had 7 receptions for 102 yards and 1 touchdown. Based on some previous seasons, he has that ability to be a big yards after catch guy. Right now, Tulsa leads Northern Illinois at halftime, and Santana has 4 catches already for 87 yards and 2 touchdowns. And in that same breath, maybe we need to start watching Tulsa in general. I know that sounds crazy. In week 1, quarterback Davis Brin went 30 of 52 for 460 yards, 8.8 yards per pass attempt, and 3 touchdowns. Right now, again at halftime, he has 146 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. I mean, yeah, they aren't a real flashy team, especially when you put them against Cincinnati, SMU, or Houston, but there's plenty of other games where they could shine. Moving on, I know that there were some concerns about tight end play or lack thereof when Western Kentucky played Austin Peay week 0. I think that was a hasty reaction. The Tops are on a bye week, but in week 1 against Hawaii, Josh Simon was targeted 3 times and had a 47-yard catch in which he drugged several defenders for a touchdown. During that same game, Joey Belgian had a catch for 19 yards. I'm not privy to the game plan, but I wouldn't be surprised if they are conserving these guys for the Indiana game. I mean, you've got to think about the fact that Simon is returning from injury. If you have a chance to beat your first Big Ten team ever, it's going to happen only with the help of your best healthy playmakers. I do think they play a much larger role the rest of the season. To round out the segment, I'm going to choose my play of the week as well as the game of the week. For play of the week, I'm going Laborn's 42-yard run, which primed the Herd to score and go up 19-15. It was an awesome play itself, made even more special considering just last year he was in junior college, driving for Uber, and I believe working at a lumber. And for game of the week, I can't pick just one when Marshall, App State, and Washington State all beat ranked teams. Games like those are what make football fun. Well, at least fun to ardent Group of 5 fans, I guess. So that does it for the G5 Minute. Until next time.
Make sure you follow Hannah at HannahLay91 on Twitter. That's HANALEI91 on Twitter. And we follow Barnabas and his tracking of the NFL draft. Barnabas, there's a lot of places that we could start with this conversation about the 2023 NFL draft and our check-in with you. I think I have to start with Marvin Harrison Jr. A little bit of tension on Twitter today about whether or not he's a better prospect than Jackson Smith-Njigba. What's your take on that one?
Yeah, so there was a lot of uproar because Dane Brugler from The Athletic tweeted that if Harrison was a member of this draft class, he would be the best he would be wide receiver 1. And granted, the top of the wide receiver class this year is a little bit shaky now that, JSN's been hurt for a day or two, or a game or two. And Kayshon Boutte, who knows how he's really going to, shake out throughout the course of the entire season. Obviously he has some attitude things that some coaches don't like. And so, we don't know how the top is going to shake out. So I don't think that's an unfair statement to say. I've been saying for months now that JSN has this weirdly long torso and short legs that make him look like he's waddling. And I think scouts are going to sour a little bit on JSN throughout the evaluation process once they turn on that tape and they go, why does he run so funny? So I don't think that's an unfair statement to make. That's not to say that JSN is not a good receiver. He is a good receiver. He produces a whole lot, and he will be one of the first receivers drafted. He will be in that first group. But I think
answer the question. Answer it.
Yeah. Right now, I think JSN is a better prospect because he has the production behind him. But if Marvin Harrison had that extra year of experience implied by him being in this draft class, then I think he would be the better prospect. So I know that's a cop-out answer, but that's where I would stand on that.
Listen, I've asked questions myself about Jackson Smith-Njigba, who is predominantly a slot wide receiver. And you usually don't see these slot wide receivers being able to move outside, but a perimeter guy could potentially move into the slot. Well, Marvin Harrison Jr. is very much a perimeter guy, and we saw him win a number of different ways today. He went over a cornerback for a touchdown in the end zone. He ran after the catch. I mean, he beat somebody deep, got a lot of separation. So we saw him be very, very versatile today. And, Austin has been on Marvin Harrison Jr. He's never said that he's better than Jackson Smith-Njigba, but he has said after the season he would be widely considered as the wide receiver 1 in Devy in C2C. And, we're on a trajectory where that is absolutely going to be the case. Let me get to some of these upsets today, Barnabas. Again, one of my favorite games to watch today was that Washington State game against Wisconsin. Cameron Ward, we consider him to be a potential NFL quarterback. What have you seen from him through 2 weeks? What did you see from him today that informs your answering of that question as to whether or not he's an NFL quarterback?
Frankly, I don't know that any of our questions have really been answered. So the first game was kind of rough, and it played out the way it did. This game was a little bit different in that he started really rough and then looked a little bit better as the game went on. Like I said earlier during the rundown, it wasn't a huge passing day. He had 200 yards total. And none of his receivers particularly was consistently winning their matchups or anything. But that being said, he was finding receivers in the right spots. And so there is something to be said about coaches, especially in the NFL, loving those guys that get just enough yards to get that first down and move the sticks every time, right? That's why Brian Robinson's evaluation was so good coming out. So there is something to be said about that. I think we need to see more. Obviously, now that we're seeing real competition, he needs to put good tape down. And while today was encouraging, it wasn't necessarily good tape. So we still definitely need to see more. But from Washington State, I really want to talk about one of his linemen, Jarrett Kingston, who plays left guard for Washington State. I think he might be a draftable guy. He's like a technician. He has to play in the phone booth. In that he's developed over the years a good technique. He keeps his head on a swivel, and he knows what he's supposed to be doing. A lot of the times his measurables and his physical traits hold him back from actually reaching that. He's kind of a lean forward type of guy, so he can only really move forward. But teams will love the fact that he knows what he's supposed to do, and that a strength and conditioning program in the NFL can get him to where he needs to go, I think.
Let's move on here to Marshall, who gets the victory over Notre Dame today. Another upset. They've got a cornerback there that you think is going to be drafted, and he has NFL bloodlines. Yeah,
we talk about NFL bloodlines, and they're so important, right? Marvin Harrison Jr., E.J. Smith, Emmitt Smith's son, who his father also had a little bit of fumbling problems. So it's funny that, those things come out in genetics as well. But Stephen Gilmore, who everyone's heard of by now because of the highlight, because he got that game-sealing pick 6 towards the end of the game, is the younger brother of, yes, you guessed it, Stephon Gilmore, which I guess there's a fair amount of age gap there. But Stephen Gilmore has similar measurables to Stephon, so it's kind of interesting. Stephon obviously went to South Carolina back in the day. And as Austin notes, the parents were very creative with names, essentially naming the two the same name. But anyway, Stephen Gilmore is kind of like he's a solid corner. He's like 6'1", 6'2"-ish. So I can imagine he probably has like 31, 32-inch arms, which is really what we mean when we say long corners, right? It's not necessarily the height, it's the wingspan that we look at. So it'll be interesting for him. He needs to leverage his physical traits more, in that he needs to increase his play strength and be able to actually use his length in a lot of catch point situations and stuff. But those are things that are definitely available to be developed in the NFL.
We are showing love to some of these G5 teams that upset Power 5 teams by noting their potential NFL draft picks. Let's move on here to App State. App State, who upset Texas A&M today. Who do you like there that could potentially be an NFL draft pick?
Yeah, so App State's kind of interesting. We've seen them the past couple of weeks. They played UNC close last week, and were really, really quite close to actually pulling that one off, right? First thing I need to note is I need to find some tape on Nick Ross. I do not have an evaluation on him, the safety for App State, but he led the team in tackles today, and I need to find some tape on him because he was just kind of everywhere. But the person I want to talk about is Nick Hampton, who's the edge there. He's like 6'4", 240, which is light. It is very. He's kind of like this a little bit of shades of like Amari Barno from last year from Virginia Tech, who's also the edge. in that they're almost pure speed guys. They're going to run and chase. They have basically one move in their toolbox. But he does that really well. And so I think we could get some higher end day 3 draft capital out of him. I know it wasn't originally on the sheet, but Georgia Southern just upset Nebraska, so maybe the Scott Frost era is coming to an end a little bit. But one person I do know from Georgia Southern is Derek Canteen, who's a corner there. He had 6 interceptions as a freshman. That's absolutely bonkers that he even got playing time. But as a true freshman, he had 6 interceptions. He's a real ball hawking catch point type of corner at 5'11", and 5'11" is roughly at that spot where you want guys that are scrappier. They have inside-outside versatility at that point. So at 5'11", 190, I think he has a good build that is going to project probably in the slot in the NFL. But you want those ball hawking guys in there, and so he has a good build, and he has really good ball hawking, as evidenced by the production. It's not just traits we're projecting here. We do need to monitor his health. He was held to only 2 games last year due to a torn pec. But it'll be interesting to monitor. And if he can continue his production throughout the whole season, he might declare early coming out.
Barnabas, my audience is going to kill me if I do not bring you back to offense. Evan Hull.
Oh,
I don't think that there's a running back that has elevated his stock in the C2C community, in the Devy community, and maybe in the NFL draft community than Hull of Northwestern.
Absolutely. Evan Hull was largely, his valuation told us he was a kind of power back that had a little bit of shiftiness, but he was going to work well in power and zone systems, which I know sounds contradictory, but he can smash it, but also hit the hole that he's supposed to, which is that vision, it translates to most systems, which is why I say that. But 14 receptions today, 14, that's just it's unspeakable in terms of, especially in Big Ten play. Running backs don't get that kind of receiving production in the Big Ten. And Evan Hull got 14 receptions today. And that just is such a boon to his evaluation, because that raises him almost maybe half a round, maybe more, just because he adds that dimension where we didn't know that he had that in his evaluation until today.
Barnabas, we appreciate you. You can follow Barnabas at PKGB on Twitter. We'll see you maybe next week. Appreciate you, man. All right, let's bring the panel in here. Let's bring Matt and Austin back, the original Devy debate crew. Guys, Alabama gets the win, but I'm worried about who you can start at Bama outside of Jahmyr Gibbs and Bryce Young. Who are you starting beyond those two through next week?
No one. It's just Bryce Young and Jahmyr Gibbs. If you really want to take a shot on someone, I'm fine just throwing Trayshawn Holden in. He seems to be the most consistent out of all those wide receivers. But yeah, nobody. It's not looking great. I think they'll get it together. Probably in 4 weeks, we'll be saying, whether, as we talked about earlier during the game recap, maybe it's Ja'Cory Brooks. Maybe Tyler Harrell comes back from injury and looks good, helps be that deep threat, if that's what they want to use him for. I'm sure we'll be talking about a wide receiver, but right now it's just Jahmyr Gibbs. And you're starting Jahmyr Gibbs, but man, that touchdown bailed him out today. You weren't feeling great until he caught that. It's just not looking good right now for these guys.
Offensively, they're not in sync necessarily yet. Austin, is Matt right? Is it just Gibbs and Young you're starting and you're kind of playing wait and see with the rest of these guys?
Are we even starting Bryce Young on a week-to-week basis? He didn't have a good fantasy week this week. What he scored, 17, 18 fantasy points, I believe, if you're playing in somewhat normal scoring. I know some of these college fantasy leagues can get a little wonky on what you're scoring exactly, but I want to see him against an SEC defense, because I tell you what, we didn't think Texas was going to be good defensively this year. They were flying around today, but I also don't think they're an SEC defense. I don't think they're on that level. So there might be weeks here. I mean, like you said, I think in 4 or 5 weeks we look back, they'll have gotten it together. I think they're too talented not to do that. But there are just so many question marks here. And the other problem is, it's an embarrassment of Richard's problem. They've got 4 or 5 star running backs. Got what? every wide receiver on your roster is the 10 or 11 deep was like the 12th rated or higher player in their class. I mean, it's a great problem to have, but I also think it's making it difficult to kind of parse out who should be on the field since none of them have really separated themselves from this point, which in turn makes it way harder for us because we're working with even less information than a coaching staff does.
We need some actionable information here, and I need to know if there are freshmen. Now, these guys are probably already drafted, so you would have to trade for them to acquire them. But are there freshmen here on Alabama's team that you would prioritize? I'm very high on Jamarian Miller. If somebody has got cold feet on Jamarian Miller, I would acquire him. But what about Kobe Prentice, who's getting on the field? But he's really only on the field because JoJo Earl is hurt. Ty Simpson, Isaiah Bond, Aaron Anderson, Shaz Preston, Emmanuel Henderson, the second-ranked running back in the class, Kendrick Law, Matt Bruning. Are you prioritizing any of these guys? Are you trying to acquire any of them?
Man, I don't know. I know that's not the answer you want to hear. We were really high on Preston. Maybe if you could get him fairly cheap, I'd go after him. I know Alfred loves Kobe Prentice, so he's probably the obvious answer because he's actually been getting on the field. I don't think he's better than Preston, but I mean, he's on the field. So that's got to mean something. Like Saban's not just throwing him out there because he looks good in a uniform. So for me, it would still be Preston. I think you could get him the cheapest because he hasn't been doing anything. But if I'm being honest, no, like I don't. I think he's gone after these transfer portal wide receivers so hard the past couple of years. I'm very afraid to keep attacking these freshman wide receivers because I feel like they're not going to do anything for multiple years. We're seeing it again. Now, none of these guys outside of Prentice are doing anything. And Prentice had one good game last week, was okay. Today wasn't anything spectacular. So it's really like, again, Preston, I guess, is my answer because he was highest rated for us. We all liked him, but I wouldn't feel great about it.
We're probably going to have a Debbie Debate show where we guessed the wide receivers who are going to transfer to Alabama next year. Well, not just the wide receivers, players in general. Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be there next year. I don't know if they're just going to turn the keys over to Chase McClellan or whomever. So that's going to be – we have to have that show. That's a good idea. Austin, any of these guys that you're actually prioritizing?
Prioritize is a strong word. Like Matt said, they're hitting that transfer portal so hard because they can. It's an alluring spot. The one thing that I think is notable, and these things will shift, their recruiting class next year is not very heavy at the skill positions. They do bring in 2 quarterbacks, but I think we're not that worried about a quarterback issue moving forward. They've got some talented guys there already. And the guys that they are bringing in are all running backs. And that backfield is very deep already. So, but not a lot of wide receivers. They bring in Malik Benson, the Benson, kid. Yeah. And then that's really it at the moment. There might be some guys that flip here later in the cycle and whatnot. But so it's not like there's guys that you point to in the future. So unless they go heavy in the portal, you got to figure some of these guys get a shot. We didn't talk at all about Ja'Cory Brooks here, did we? I mean,
we talked about him in the rundown, but
he came in late in that game, got some targets. Yeah. It almost seems to me like Saban with Ja'Cory Brooks is like, I'm waiting for you to do it. Right. I know you can do it.
Yeah.
Here's a moment. Go ahead and show me. And he kind of did today.
It seems like he got inserted in the game when they needed the offense to move, and he was getting targeted he only had like 3 for 33 or something like that. But it was just like that Auburn game where they needed something to happen and they started targeting Ja'Cory Brooks. It was the same thing here. So, I mean, if you have him, you're going to hold him. So, all right. If you have this player, are you holding them? Tyler Buckner, Notre Dame, Marcus Freeman. I don't know if they are all toast. Tyler Buckner was 18 for 32, 201 yards, 2 interceptions, 1 a pick 6. He missed Brendan Lindsay for he could have punted the ball to him and it would have been a touchdown, overthrows him. He hadn't been great through 2 games, Austin.
Yeah, I think I touch up my rankings every Saturday, Sunday during the season here. Usually it's a couple spots here or there, like adding a name that I hadn't had before. Buckner was kind of one of the first names this season where I just dropped him like 30 spots, and I don't feel that bad doing it. I didn't hate where I had him before this season, which was top 10, just because we had seen just enough flashes to make you think that if he could put it together and this offensive coordinator and system could kind of highlight what he does best, that he could be really, really dangerous. But neither has really happened. This offense doesn't seem kind of like Bama. They're not in sync. This vaunted offensive line that is supposed to be like legendary at Notre Dame every year is not good this year. I don't know. I mean, Barnabas, is there a lot of like highly draftable guys on this line right now, or at least that are on your radar? It's bad.
Yeah, I mean, Notre Dame is always going to have those guys. Like Jarrett Patterson's probably the main guy that's coming out this year. And it's mostly like, every team likes to draft a Wisconsin lineman and a Notre Dame lineman. And that's just kind of the reason why he's there. I think he has that ideal build, so he's gonna play in the NFL. But I mean, teams have also really soured on Notre Dame linemen. But in general, the bigger problem might be that similar to Bryce Young, Tyler Buchner, I don't think understands protections either. And I think that's a really underrated skill that people don't understand for fantasy as well, where quarterbacks, we always talk about how offensive lines need to give quarterbacks time. But if the quarterbacks don't set the protections correctly, that offensive line is not in position to give them that time. So Buchner also, we always knew that his arm talent was a little bit questionable, and that his biggest value was as a runner. And, I want to love him more than anyone because, he's Korean. But at the end of the day, like, that arm talent just isn't there. And he I don't think he's helping himself with the line either.
Yeah, I'm dropping him some, but I'm not dropping him 30 like Austin. I think my big thing with him is, hey, no, look, we know you grade prospects harder than I do. I'm trying to be the nice guy. I try to, there's still a little bit of hope left for Buchner. Look, not everybody can be Quinn Ewers, right? Doesn't play for 2 years, just goes out there, dominates practically the best team in all of college football, unfortunately gets hurt. I want to see a little bit more from Buchner. I'm not going to judge him too much on an Ohio State team that we have all talked about. Jim Knowles, right? Supposed to make that defense look really good. They looked good. The Marshall game, definitely concerning, but I don't want to put too much stock in that. There's a lot of talk that they were kind of riding a kind of an emotional low after feeling like they could have beaten Ohio State. Then you go into a Marshall team, maybe you don't get up for. He's a young quarterback.
Imagine the emotional low after you lose to Marshall week 2.
I know,
it's not getting better.
That's the thing. I put that more on Freeman, though, than I put that on Buchner. He's a young quarterback. Like, you've got to help develop him and make things easier for him. And I think one of the arguments for him, too, is outside of Lorenzo Styles and Michael Mayer is a great tight end, like, he doesn't have great weapons either. Like, we're asking a lot out of a kid, as Barnabas just mentioned, doesn't really have the greatest arm talent as well. And now we're expecting to have him make his wide receivers better. So I'm likely going to drop him in my ranking some this weekend as well, but I'm not going to be out on him yet. I want to see what he does throughout the rest of this season, but it's not looking good. A loss to Marshall is bad.
Buchner or Jaron Hall for you, Matt?
Oh, God, I know, because I was watching that game. Jaron Hall threw a dime in the back of the end zone here just a couple minutes ago.
This is also Jaron Hall's second season starting. I mean, we've seen some development from him last year. We don't know what Tyler Buchner's development trajectory is going to be necessarily yet.
To steal a line from my good friend Mike at Iowa Michael, he quote tweeted Debbie Debate. Big fan of Felix's. Unfortunately, his Iowa Hawkeyes lost today to Felix's Hunter Decker. I'm going to take the reroll in Tyler Buchner, if that makes sense. I don't think Jaron Hall is going to get the first round draft capital that everybody thinks he does. I'll take the shot on Tyler Buchner and see if he can develop into that instead of taking Jaron Hall. Because at worst, Buchner maybe starts figuring it out, and even if it's just with his legs, I'm going to get a couple years of college production out of him. Jaron Hall's gone after this year. I don't see the NFL future with Hall. Like, I know he's getting first round.
I don't think Hall has to be gone this year. He's like 24, but I don't think he has to be gone if he doesn't want to.
It's true. He probably could play like Brandon Weed until he's 28. I feel like he's probably only got one more year.
Baby.
But I would just take the reroll with Buchner. I think there's more time for him to develop. I like what Notre Dame has been building, especially in this recruiting class. The weapons that they're bringing in at Jaden Greathouse, like, he could turn it around in a year. So I would take that with Buchner. Bet on the upside. I just think there's more upside. I mean, Barnabas, you're the draft guy. Do you see more upside with Buchner over Hall?
I don't think either of them are playing in the NFL, frankly. If I'm like perfectly honest with you, neither of them are playing in the NFL, and that's fine. And so in that sense, like, yeah, you get the extra year with Tyler Buchner. But here's the thing: Notre Dame's system, like separation tool weapons are the ones that are the most quarterback friendly. And while BYU doesn't have that, they can create that with their system. While Notre Dame almost actively goes against finding separation. And so like in some sense, like the potential is capped on both of them. And in terms of the draft, I don't think either of them are really NFL quarterbacks, but yeah, you get the extra year Buckner. So that's the most valid argument I can see from there.
If I'm Marcus Freeman, if I'm Tommy Rees, I don't know what they're doing with Audric Estime. I'm going to put Chris Tyree on the field. I'm going to get Chris Tyree in space with screens, with swing routes, that sort of thing. And you got to get Lorenzo Styles involved in bubble screens. Do some things to boost Tyler Buckner's confidence early on. Maybe they have an Anthony Richardson game plan for him where very early on he's not throwing anything beyond 5 yards down the field. I will say that I thought that arm strength would potentially be a problem for Tyler Buckner. Arm strength was not the problem. Like, he can get the ball. He can make opposite hash throws. I was actually surprised to see that. Now, he's staring down cornerbacks when he does that, but he has a velocity to get the ball to the opposite hash. So let's just see if he develops. Let's go from one quarterback to another. Haynes King is trash. I don't like even saying that. He is bad. This is a team that has expectations. Like, we are this year's Georgia. We're going to go ahead and beat Alabama. We're going to go ahead and come out of the SEC. They cannot do that with Haynes King at quarterback. Do you think that they make the change? They've got the LSU transfer, Max Johnson, who was competing for this job, and then they have the 5-star freshman in Connor Wegman. Austin, what's the likelihood that Haynes King comes out next game and he's the starter?
Yeah, 2 Monarchs down in 1 week, it feels like here, a queen and a king. And I know the theme of the show here has kind of been NFL bloodlines. Max Johnson, NFL bloodlines. His dad was Brad Johnson. His dad played quarterback for the Buccaneers. Yeah, you couldn't tell by his
and the Vikings. Yeah,
vanilla play style that his dad was Brad Johnson. How come? Look, I don't think either of those quarterbacks can elevate an offense. And I don't think the skill positions there, at least not yet. Give Stewart another year or two. Give Chris Marshall another year or two. Give whatever they're coming in next year another year or two to kind of get together. Maybe you can say, well, the skill guys will make him better. You just have to kind of get the ball where it needs to go on time. I don't even know if they're quite at that point yet. I said all offseason, I think this Texas A&M team is a year or two away. And I think no matter who they put at quarterback, I think they're going to struggle to move the ball consistently. The run game has not been what we thought it could be this year. Achane has flashed. He's had some nice carries, but it's been very mediocre competition. I would expect him to do that. Nobody else on the team has really stepped up. They don't have, they don't have a Spiller on this team that can kind of run with Achane. They for whatever reason, none of the other guys on the team have stepped up yet to do that. No LJ Johnson, no Amani Daniels, no Le'Veon Moss. None of these 4-5-star guys have shown that. Is it a development problem? Is it a Jimbo problem? Is it they just haven't found the right guy yet problem? Could be a little bit of all three, but I don't think making this change helps them. But I do think at some point you have to make the change just so it doesn't look like you're complacent with your quarterback throwing for 90 yards against App State and looking
less than 100 yards. That is just ridiculous against a G5 team.
He had 300 yards last week, but he wasn't good. That's a box score scout if you're looking at that game last week and saying he was good. He threw a couple really bad interceptions. He was shaky all game. He doesn't look like he has a grasp of this offense at all. This Texas A&M is going to go 8-4 again. Is what they're going to do.
That's optimistic.
You think it worse than that? 7-6, 5 less 6-7.
Here's the thing: they don't need a quarterback that can elevate the offense. They just need one that doesn't actively hold them back, right? I think a part of the reason why the running game isn't doing anything is because they're not scared of Haynes King. They're just going to load the box up with 8 people and just say, okay, run. Like one of these, So Haynes, I think you're right. I think they're just waiting for Connor Wegman to get comfortable enough with the offense that they can just throw him in there. But yeah, I think it's all connected.
We've got NIL. We've got player freedom. I think we just need to open up trading. You should be able to trade Spencer Petras for Haynes King and see how it turns out.
Surprisingly, that's the one worst quarterback move that they could make is to go to.
I don't know that it is. All right, we're going to maintain this quarterback theme here. Speaking of trading quarterbacks, who would you rather have? Barnabas, we'll start with you as your starting quarterback because you're our NFL draft guy. Will Levis or Anthony Richardson?
Yeah, this is like the fun question because when it comes down to it, a lot of analysts have been saying on Twitter and stuff, uh, it's it's that which quarterback is going to be more liked by Twitter and which quarterback is going to be more liked by teams. And I think what it's going to come down to is that Levis is going to be liked way more by teams than he is going to be on the by Twitter scouts. And Anthony Richardson is going to have, his biggest fans out there, but it won't be on teams. I would rather have Levis partially because what we just saw today was rough, right? Not that Will Levis looked good, but part of what was missing from his evaluation was we didn't know if he could throw deep because he was just dumping things down to Wandale and praying that he gets yak. And if we're getting longer passes now, I think that really contributes to his evaluation.
Yeah, really quick so we can get to this question. It's Levis for me too because he's a better passer. We've talked about this. That matters to these NFL teams. Richardson's got to continue to improve.
He is marginally better, and I don't know that he is an NFL level passer. I don't know that he's an NFL level athlete, and I also think that we may have seen his ceiling as far as his development, and also he's a weirdo. I mean, he just comes off as a weirdo. I don't know if that's going to fly in an NFL locker room when you're putting mustard and ketchup in your coffee. Like that's just so. I'm going to wait and see with Anthony Richardson because we know he has NFL athleticism. Does he have an NFL processing ability? Does he have NFL consistency in the as far as accuracy? We don't know that yet, but I think we've seen Will Levis's ceiling. Nathan Ruffalo joins us, and he asks, any thoughts on Lance Leopold at Kansas, his 2-0 start? They beat West Virginia 55-42 in overtime today. Austin, Lance Leopold comes over from Buffalo, and brings his program to Kansas. Not only did he bring his not only did he come to Kansas, but I feel like 4 of 5 starting offensive linemen on Buffalo's team, came over. They had a lot of transfers. It just shows how highly his players regarded him. What's your take on what Lance Leopold is doing there in Lawrence?
Yeah, I think we talked. It was probably going to be a year or two before he was able to get that team kind of where he wanted. They might be half a year ahead of schedule or something like that. Kansas didn't really have any FBS level athletes on the team. And I think that's the big turnaround. Obviously, brought over some of these guys from Buffalo. They're lucky enough to have Devin Neal grow up in their own backyard and snag him, a guy like Jalen Daniels at quarterback. Major upgrade over what they've had there over the past couple of years. Defensively, I think they've started to bring in a couple of guys as well. Like no one that's an obvious draft prospect or an obvious star,
Kenny
but
Logan.
Like the difference in athleticism is stark. Like they look like they actually belong on the same field as a West Virginia or when they get in a heavier conference play here. I'm sure they'll look like they belong mostly on the same field as Texas or Oklahoma. I mean, they might not win those games, but I think consistently getting those games within a score 10 points in the next year or two, I think is a big achievement for Kansas. And actually, I've heard Nebraska fans like praying for him to be the next guy up at Nebraska. That wouldn't be a bad hire because he won't try to go there and do something sexy and unattainable. I think he knows what to do to go in and kind of completely turn over a team that's kind of destitute and turn them into something fairly quickly. I think he could do that job. Sorry, Kansas fans. I don't want to pry him away from you already because I like him there. But you're muted, Felix.
Definitely doing a good job building a Kansas program that doesn't have a great history of success there. So hats off to Kansas that's 2-0 and Notre Dame that's 0-2. All right, let's move on here. We got to check in with some of the games that are on right now, Matthew. I hope that you're ready for that. I gave you some leeway time there. We normally check in with Kevin Coleman. Kevin Coleman is at a game today, but we still want to follow him. Go ahead and listen to the Debbie Royale with himself and Christian Williams and Jeff Bell on Tuesday nights. And you can follow Kevin at DuBois_2020. At DuBois_22. You can follow Matt Bruning at Sports Fanatic MB. And you can, of course, listen to him on the Debbie Debate, where he will get very emotional at times on the Debbie Debate. Very passionate on that show.
I prefer passion.
Matt,
Sounds better.
Matt, I think I want to start with Baylor, Baylor BYU. What is it looking? It's looking like it's in the third quarter there.
Yeah.
BYU without its two starting receivers, but it's staying in there against a good Baylor team.
Yeah, they're playing fairly good defense and trying to at least run the ball a lot. Quaylon Jones has actually gotten more carries than Tay McWilliams, 32 yards and 2 touchdowns for him.
It's 13-10,
Yeah.
13-10 with 8 minutes left in the third.
Yeah. Blake Shapen has unfortunately not done much and has not looked good. Jaron Hall has really outclassed him in the passing side of things, which hurts my start-sit decision this morning when I said sit Jaron Hall. He's already passed for almost 200 yards, sitting at 175, and had a beautiful touchdown in the back of the end zone. Nice little toe touch by Chase Roberts for that touchdown. So really good for BYU. It's so far from the parts that I've been able to catch has been a really good game. BYU just got the ball back, and they have it on Baylor's 34-yard line.
All right. Kevin Coleman is actually at Oregon State, Fresno State, which is also in the third quarter. The third quarter just began. How are my Fighting Jake Hainers looking?
So not great. I actually thought they would be beating up on Oregon State. I think as Oregon State is a team we may have underrated. We mentioned this recently that we don't pay as much attention to the Pac-12 as we should. Now he's thrown for 76 yards, 20 completions on 28 attempts. But no touchdowns here. Jordan Mims has gotten a touchdown on the ground. He's looked pretty good from the parts of the game that I was able to see. Chance Nolan, who's a quarterback that I really liked last year, thought he was going to continue to do good. Really good last week. Just 3 for 9, 33 yards. He has not looked good. It's really been the defense that is kind of carrying Oregon State over Fresno State right now. And then Silas Bolden did get a rushing touchdown, one long carry. I believe it was for a little over 30 yards. So defensive struggle, which I was not expecting. I thought this might be a nice little offensive shootout between these two teams, and it is not the case.
Let's move on here to I think Michigan at Hawaii, or Hawaii at Michigan is still on because there was a significant rain delay. If you have one available, Jay Hainer.
I do. It is over.
It's over now. Jake Hainer was looking very good early on. I'm not exactly sure how he finished, but how did Michigan look statistically in that?
So statistically,
JJ McCarthy.
JJ
McCarthy. Listen, I'm all discombobulated.
So JJ McCarthy, 11 for 12, 229 yards and 3 touchdowns through the air, just at his 16 yards on the ground. I'm going to be honest, I expected more against Hawaii, but I think that'll be enough to solidify him the job, as you, me, and Mox talked about on Better Sports Radio this morning. Blake Corum, good day, 88 yards on the ground, 1 touchdown. Donovan Edwards kind of struggled in this one, just 26 yards. But Ronnie Bell had a good game, 76 yards through the air and a touchdown. Along with Cornelius Johnson, who also got a touchdown and 71 yards. Again, J.J. McCarthy, we were looking to see what he did. Austin St. Tay McWilliams for Baylor hurt. I did not know that, so thank you for pointing that out, Austin. Again, only 1 incompletion. Granted, I know it's a bad Hawaii team. That's still pretty impressive to only have 1 incompletion for a guy that we question sometimes what he's going to do passing the ball. Overall, looks like a good game. He put up 56 points on Hawaii. Is more than they were able to put up against Colorado State. I guess we'll see what this means for him moving forward if he ends up solidifying this job or not.
We talk about player trajectories and stories. I mean, J.J. McCarthy came in as a very highly touted 5-star, didn't get the starting job, missed the spring due to injury, didn't get the starting job coming into fall camp. And now, maybe we're going to see him start in his second season. Maybe he can elevate that offense. I've talked a lot about how Jim Harbaugh needs J.J. McCarthy to play well and to play like a 5-star, not like Shea Patterson, not like some of the other quarterbacks that they've had there at Michigan recently. I think that's it. Is that it? As far Mississippi State, go ahead.
We've got other games. Yeah, this one hurts. Will Rogers, if you started him in a lot of places like I have, he's killing you. 87 yards to the air, 1 touchdown, 1 interception.
Mississippi State at Arizona.
Yeah, Arizona. It is 15-10, about to go into halftime. About 2 minutes left. Will Rogers and Mississippi State does have the ball, but again, 15-18 for 87 yards. Just not looking good. This whole team, like the leading receiver, has 31 yards right now, and it's Ra Thomas. It's just not looked impressive for Mississippi State. Maybe this is more of a shout out to Arizona, and they really are turning this around. We hope that they'd be a good offensive team. I thought they played pretty good defense last week. So far, it looks like they're doing that here. On the Arizona side of the ball, they're not doing much defense or offensively as well. Jaden Delora under 100 yards as well, just 91 with an interception. Jacob Cowing, just 17 yards. Tetora McMillan has not registered a catch yet. Jonah Coleman, the freshman, just 3 yards on 2 carries. This has been a defensive struggle, which I not ever expected to say between an Arizona-Mississippi State game, but that's where we're at.
All right, Matt, appreciate it, man. We will see you next week, all right? Austin, let's close out the show looking at storylines from next week. I don't know that there's the marquee game that we had, the marquee game or games that we had this week. Georgia at South Carolina. I think that we might see the end of Spencer Rattler as we consider him to be an NFL or Devy potential asset. I think we're going to see that's going to be done after that game next week.
He was really bad today. I actually watched a lot of that game. His trademark is his arm throwing deep, and he was just consistently missing by a ton deep. If he can't even do the kind of that thing that he's supposed to be amazing at, they need to just rely on the run there and hope that he can not cost them games. Yeah, it's bad. Georgia's going to hang a 40 burger on him pretty easily, I think.
The second part of that home and home, Penn State going to Auburn. We saw a huge game from Nick Singleton today, 179 yards rushing. Drew Aller had 2 touchdown passes. I don't know if we're going to see a lot of them against Auburn, but it is a game that I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, and Auburn didn't look great today. They played San Jose State. They won by a score. Would it shock you if they went out next week, looked way better, and beat Penn State? It's kind of how Auburn's thing, but I also wouldn't be shocked if Penn State goes in there, kind of establishes the run early. It's a slower paced game. It ends up being like 25 to 15 or something like that. That kind of feels like the game that we're going to see next week. Not a fun game, a sexy game, but a game that Penn State just goes in there and takes care of business.
After a rough initial outing, Devin Leary, quarterback at NC State, who some consider to be, maybe a fringe or late first round potential NFL draft pick. I don't know that that's the case. He's definitely going to be at the Senior Bowl. They take on Texas Tech at home, and I can't wait to see what the line is as far as the over-under, because this should be a high-scoring, fun affair.
Donovan Smith saw a really tough front seven today from Houston, and I think he ultimately, I would say he passed the test today. Not his best game, but it certainly wasn't bad. A similar matchup next week, but he's got a week where he just coming off a very similar kind of experience. This is kind of the game that you would have wanted to warm up for NC State. I could see Texas Tech pulling this one out. I really do think they're going to give this NC State team trouble, and NC State hasn't looked that convincing this year. They really haven't. I thought they'd look much better.
They haven't. Michigan State looked convincing today against a lesser opponent. They traveled to Washington with Kalen DeBoer, with Michael Penix Jr., with your boys, Austin, Romeo Odunze, and Jalen McMillan.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited for this one. I'm glad you put this one on the list. It's very different kind of stylistic
Absolutely.
Teams here, kind of like we got with Washington State, Wisconsin, not quite on that differential level. But I Michigan State, they're going to have to run the ball effectively in this game and control clock. That's what they're going to have to do. I don't think you can trust what's their quarterback's name? I'm totally blanking, to like win a game for you, especially at this level of opponent. I just don't think he can do that. I keep wanting to say Hauser. I know that's not who it is. That's the freshman backup.
That's the freshman backup. Yeah, I'm blanking on it too. Anyway, maybe the best game. Maybe the best game. If Texas A&M hadn't lost today, this would easily be the best game. But Miami undefeated at Texas A&M. We're going to see Tyler Van Dyke on a big stage.
Yeah. Miami looked really bad first half, cleaned it up second half. I don't think they're going to be able to move the ball that well in this game because they really, they played Southern Miss. It's not a potent defense there. But A&M, would it shock you if Haynes King goes for under 125, 150 pass yards again? It wouldn't shock me at all. It just wouldn't. And this is the kind of game, though, where I think you would see a switch at halftime if things aren't going well. This is the kind of opponent where you just say, shot in the arm, let's try something different here. So If you're a Texas A&M fan, maybe you're hoping they're down by like 10 at halftime and you get to see Max Johnson come out in the second half. Maybe that's your hope.
Well, we will be there to see it and to track it all. Pay attention to Campus to Canton on Twitter so you can see who the player of the week is. 179 yards is going to be tough to beat for Nick Singleton as Campus to Canton's freshman of the week, but we got to figure out who the player of the week is going to be. And shout out to Darian Chafin of Incarnate Ward, who had 7 receptions, 262 yards, and 2 touchdowns against Nevada today. All right. Good night.
One other game I want you to pick real quick, Felix. I think he shut it off. Maybe.
No, I didn't end it. That would have been the perfect ending, but go ahead.
Duquesne, Hawaii. Pick this game, and then we get to go home.
I'm taking Duquesne.
Terrible. Yeah.
Where is it? Where is it going to be played?
It's at Hawaii. Duquesne gets a free trip to Hawaii, and they probably get to beat them.
I want to see the line on that one. I'm taking Duquesne.
There we go.
Say night, Austin.
Good night, everybody.